There is something deeply wrong with the way we were taught to deal with solitude. From childhood, we learned that being alone is a sign of failure, a misstep, a kind of social punishment. But what if it's exactly the opposite? What if solitude is, in fact, a disguised privilege, the gateway to a freedom that few dare to cross? This video is not a lament about the absence of others. It's a journey inward, a provocative invitation to rethink what it means to be alone, and to realize that maybe we've never truly been accompanied. And the most intriguing part, maybe we've never truly been present. Get ready to question everything you've ever believed about companionship, love, freedom, and yourself. From an early age, we're taught that being alone is a problem to be solved, as if the silence around us revealed a flaw in our existence. But it's precisely there, in the empty space the world avoids, that consciousness awakens. Being alone is not absence, it's full presence. When the external noise fades, the inner noise emerges. And with it, the possibility of hearing what has always been muffled, your own voice. Solitude has a texture few can endure. Not because it's cruel, but because it's honest. When we step away from others, we are forced to face ourselves. No masks, no distractions, no constant social validation. And in that confrontation, something extraordinary happens. The mind, once numbed by stimuli, begins to breathe. Time slows down. Attention turns inward. And then we realize, we didn't know who we were just too busy to notice. Nietzsche wrote, "Man's greatness lies in being a bridge, not an end." That bridge begins within. Only those who allow themselves to be alone can cross it. It's not physical isolation that transforms, but symbolic isolation, the kind that invites us to leave the current of others and dive into our own waters. At the bottom of that dive, we don't find sadness. We find origin. And in origin lies clarity. If you feel alone, understand, you're not lost, you're just beginning. It's the start of consciousness, not the end of companionship. Culture teaches us to fear solitude, but it is, in fact, the most fertile ground for inner blooming. It doesn't weaken us. On the contrary, it prepares us. Because only those who can hold themselves alone are capable of connecting with others without losing themselves. There's a kind of presence heavier than absence. It surrounds us but doesn't touch us. It speaks to us but doesn't listen. The crowd, in its welcoming nature, seems to offer human warmth, but often, that warmth is too tepid to truly comfort. In the name of belonging, we accept superficial relationships that only disguise loneliness. And the more people around us, the harder it becomes to see how alone we really are. The comfort of the crowd is also its danger. It intoxicates us with stimuli, distractions, and promises of acceptance. But in return, it demands inner silence. Not the silence of rest, but the silence of conformity. Few realize the hidden cost of always being surrounded, the cost of not having to think. Social anesthesia doesn't teach us to love others, only to fear the discomfort of the self. And so, we collect faces while losing the face that lives within. It's easy to lose yourself in the crowd. After all, there you don't need to be deep just to fit. But this constant adaptation slowly drains our most unique qualities. As Jean-Paul Sartre said, hell is other people, not because they're evil but because so often they force us to abandon who we are in order to be tolerated. What begins as a search for companionship ends as a disguised flight from the emptiness that scares us. And perhaps that's the cruelest dilemma. We want so badly to be with others that we forget to be with ourselves. But shallow bonds are like leaky cups, no matter how much they try to contain, they never hold. Being among many is not an antidote to loneliness. On the contrary, it may be its most sophisticated disguise. And at the end of the day, nothing is more despairing than feeling alone among everyone. The pain we associate with solitude rarely comes from the absence of company, it comes from the absence of authenticity. What hurts is not being alone, but realizing that for so long we were surrounded and still invisible. Invisible even to ourselves. We mold ourselves, edit ourselves, empty ourselves in the name of a love that only lasts if we hide who we really are. And when we finally receive acceptance, the taste is bitter. We were loved. But for a character. That realization is devastating. It unmasks not just others but also our own concessions. Every time we say yes when we want to say no, a part of us falls silent. With every adaptation to please, a layer of our truth is lost. The presence of others in these cases doesn't fill, it amplifies the emptiness. Because standing beside someone without being whole is to be more alone than ever. Genuine solitude, the one we choose to reconnect, is far less painful than the company where we must disappear to fit in. The real pain lies in realizing that we often confused love with conditional acceptance. That we were liked only while we adjusted, while we caused no discomfort. Recognizing this is liberating even though it may feel like mourning at first. A mourning for the version of ourselves we created to survive. But when we stop betraying ourselves, we begin for the first time to find ourselves. And in that encounter, even if solitary, there's more truth than in 1,000 relationships built on self-denial. Because love that doesn't demand camouflage is the only one truly worth it, and it starts within. There is a disconcerting paradox in the human condition. To truly connect, you must first detach. It's in retreat that we become whole, and only the whole can fully meet another. While we try to please everyone, we dissolve into expectations. But when we allow ourselves the silence of non-need, we become magnetic. To stop trying to be accepted is, ironically, the first step toward attracting what truly resonates with who we are. Distancing isn't rejecting the world, it's discerning what in it makes sense to us. It's refusing the noise to hear the melody of our own essence. Only then can we identify true bonds, because truth doesn't shout, it whispers. And that whisper is only audible in the stillness of introspection. Voluntary isolation creates a kind of existential filter. What can't stand your authentic presence simply fades away. And what remains? That is worth living. Pascal said that all of man's unhappiness stems from his inability to sit alone in a room. And it's in that room, far from social stages, that masks fall. When you stop explaining yourself, those who truly want to understand come closer. When you stop performing, relationships stop being theater. Solitude clears the field and reveals with clarity. Connection isn't in the number of bonds, but in the quality of presence. Instead of fearing distance, try cultivating it as a tool for revelation. What is real survives silence. What is shallow depends on noise. And as you stop fighting for approval, you begin to live a life with its own gravity, where what comes to you is not the result of effort but of coherence. In the end, connection is a privilege reserved for those who first disconnected. Arthur Schopenhauer didn't see solitude as a burden, but as a privilege of elevated spirits. For him, the truly wise man not only tolerates solitude, he seeks it. Because he knows that the best ideas, the sharpest insights, and the rarest clarity only emerge when we are free from constant external interference. In a world increasingly noisy, silence has become a luxury, and only those unafraid of depth dare to dwell in it. Meanwhile, mediocrity feeds on distraction. It lives on noise, stimuli, notifications. It needs to always be connected, to avoid facing the abyss of inner emptiness. And this hyperconnectivity generates a tired, fragmented, superficial mind. A mind that doesn't think, it only reacts. In this context, solitude seems like punishment. But for those who cultivate depth, it is refuge, nourishment, and freedom. Because in it, the mind finally breathes. Solitude is not isolation. It's a presence with oneself so complete that it requires no distraction. It's an internal space that allows creation, reflection, and realignment. Great works of philosophy, science, and art were born in moments of seclusion. As Blaise Pascal said, "The eternal silence of infinite spaces frightens me, and yet, it is in that silence that the vastest thoughts are revealed." That's where chaos finds form. The deep mind, like an ocean, needs stillness to reveal its depths. And that depth, that mysterious territory where our true self lives, only reveals itself when we leave the outside world. Outside. Solitude, then, is not renunciation. It is conquest. And the more we cultivate it, the farther we move from the noise of mediocrity and closer to a life that finally makes sense, not for others but for us. The idea of not needing anyone may sound at first like coldness. But in truth, it represents the purest form of freedom. When you understand that you don't need to be completed, validated, or saved, you stop living for others' approval. Emotional independence is not a lack of love, it's maturity. It's the end of neediness and the beginning of presence. Being with someone, then, ceases to be a necessity and becomes a choice. Modern romanticism often sells dependency as a virtue. Phrases like "you're my other half," or "without you I'm nothing," are seen as tokens of affection, when in fact they reveal a lack of self. Emotional dependency is a prison decorated with flowers. It masks insecurities, intensifies fears, and turns love into addiction. And like any addiction, it comes at a high price: the loss of autonomy. Being whole in oneself is rare because it requires courage. It means facing your own voids without turning to human distractions. That's why so many avoid this journey. It's lonely but profoundly liberating. And this mastery only begins when we stop looking to others for what can only be found within. True peace doesn't depend on external circumstances, it is cultivated internally. Reaching this state is a rupture. A point where, even while loving, you know you can walk away. Even while wanting, you know you don't need. And in that freedom lies a rare kind of power, the power of being whole. Nothing is more terrifying and at the same time more sublime than discovering you already are what you sought in others. And that the true companionship is not the one that fills you, but the one that overflows. Solitude does hurt, yes. To deny that would be inhuman. There are days when the silence is heavy, when someone's absence echoes inside us like a scream. But there is a deeper, subtler, and more lasting pain, that of not recognizing yourself in your own reflection. The pain of living an entire life meeting others' expectations, only to realize in the end that you no longer know who you really are. That pain doesn't scream, but it corrodes. It doesn't show up suddenly, it accumulates. Fleeing solitude is a natural impulse. After all, no one enjoys seeing themselves unfiltered. But when we avoid solitude, we also avoid clarity. It's like covering the mirror because we don't like the image. It doesn't fix anything, it only prolongs the discomfort. The constant presence of others may distract us, but it doesn't heal. And the longer we delay that internal encounter, the more we lose sight of what could truly set us free. Being surrounded by people is no guarantee of direction. We can walk with crowds and still be lost. Because the true north isn't outside, it's within. And only those who face the desert of introspection can access it. As Lao Tzu said, knowing others is intelligence, knowing yourself is wisdom. That wisdom requires solitude, requires time, requires the necessary discomfort of facing yourself with no escape. So yes, solitude hurts, but it passes. The pain of living a life without identity, however, endures. It seeps into relationships, choices, routines. It dulls everything even under the sun. And it only breaks when we stop running, when we accept silence not as punishment but as a path. The path to finally knowing who we are. And where we actually want to go. There's a kind of strength that makes no noise. It doesn't raise its voice, doesn't flaunt itself, doesn't need to win arguments. This strength is born in the silence of self-sufficiency. When you learn to be alone, truly alone, you discover that no one else has power over your destiny. Because most power plays are sustained by the fear of loss, and those who don't fear being alone are untouchable. What can anyone take from someone who already sustains themselves? Solitude becomes a shield against manipulation. Those who don't need an audience don't bow to the spectacle. Those who don't beg for affection don't subject themselves to toxic relationships in the name of company. The desperation for approval weakens even the brightest of spirits. But comfort in solitude repels flattery, attracts authenticity, and establishes firm boundaries. It's like a magnetic field that repels anything misaligned with your inner truth. No one can control someone who has no price. And the price, more often than not, is neediness. If I don't accept this, I'll be alone. That sentence imprisons. It's with it that silences are bought, abuse is tolerated, principles bargained. But those who've learned to live with their own silence won't sell themselves for company. They don't fold out of fear. This state of self-sufficiency doesn't mean indifference, it means discernment. You still love, interact, connect, but now with conscious choices, not with the desperation of someone trying to fill a void. Those who are enough for themselves live lightly. And that lightness is unsettling, because it reveals how many are still prisoners of need. To be free, after all, is not to need in order to be together, it's to choose to be together, even being able to be alone. There's a great confusion between solitude and isolation. To be solitary in its deepest sense doesn't mean being distant from people, it means being gathered within oneself. To be solitary is to inhabit your own being with dignity, without needing constant external validation. While isolation is born of rejection, solitude is born of choice. And that choice holds power. It reveals a person who is whole, not divided, nor fragmented by the desire to please. The presence of others then becomes a bonus, not a necessity. It's what happens when a cup is already full, it overflows. So it is with presence. When we're whole, connections are more authentic, less needy. There is no demand disguised as affection, no expectation disguised as care. There is simply encounter. And a true encounter only happens when neither side is trying to complete themselves through the other. In the modern world, we are deluded daily. Social media, packed schedules, constant comparisons, all of it fragments us. The soul weakens in excess. And that's where solitude presents itself as healing. A return to center, a pause in the chaos, a recovery of the integrity lost among so many stimuli. As Thoreau wrote, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to confront only the essential facts of life." That's the clarity solitude offers. To be solitary, then, is a higher form of consciousness. It's living with yourself as lightly as you live with the world. It's not needing to be surrounded to feel alive. And when that wholeness is reached, everything changes. Relationships transform, time expands, silence ceases to be a threat. Because in the end, being whole is what allows us to truly be with another, without losing who we are in the process. For a long time, we've searched for peace as if it were something external. We've looked for it in relationships, achievements, travels, distractions. As if it were always a step ahead, waiting somewhere just out of reach. But the truth, as unsettling as it may seem, is that the peace we long for is in the one place we avoid the most, inside. Not in the noise of accomplishments, but in the silence of self-knowledge. Solitude, far from being a punishment, is the path that leads us to that sacred place. When we strip away the noise, when we stop running, we realize that the restlessness we feel outside is a reflection of the disorder within. And the silence we once feared is actually a portal. With each layer of solitude faced, we uncover traces of who we were, who we are, and who we can become. And in that re-encounter, something deep falls into alignment. It's curious how we fear the idea of being alone, when it is in that space that real life happens. The major decisions, the genuine awakenings, the construction of meaning, all of that happens in intimacy with the soul. Because within us there is presence, there is strength, there is wisdom accumulated through existence. There are ancestral voices, deep intuitions, and a lucidity the world tries to make us forget. Solitude, when welcomed, becomes companionship. And that companionship is the most loyal we can have. It's where we find the peace that no place, no person, and no achievement can offer. Because true peace doesn't depend. It simply is. In the end, the solitude we've long avoided may be the only honest road to ourselves. The world outside may offer distraction, but only the world within offers meaning. And meaning is what turns life from noise into poetry. The question that remains is simple yet profound. How many people have you been with, without ever having been with yourself? And more, what exactly have you been avoiding when you avoid being alone? If this resonated with you, comment below. At what moment in your life did solitude become revelation? Or, what part of you was forgotten out of fear of not being accepted? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications.